This is the Griffin Realty Group Ask-A-Griffin podcast, episode number 50, our final stage in the closing process when buying a home. The question on the table is, should you be flexible during the closing process? Are you a home seller or a home buyer who has questions about selling or buying residential property, but you can't find an easy way to get your answers? Well, then, hey, you are definitely in the right place. I'm Danny Griffin, the founder of the Griffin Realty Group and the host of the Ask-A-Griffin podcast. Now, to help you take immediate action to get started in the right direction, if you need to sell or buy residential property right now or in the very near future, you can take advantage of our free step-by-step guides that are waiting for you at griffincourses.com. Okay, so let's get started. In this episode, this is the final podcast in the closing process, which is also the final process in the buying process, okay? So the question on the table is, should you be flexible during the closing process? And, not everybody wants to be. I get it that if you are somebody of precision and you are professional and you expect everybody to behave the same way, I don't blame you. I think that's it's a fair way to feel about the world. Unfortunately, the world doesn't always cooperate. So it's difficult, and we have to remember that all parties, this is the first point here, that all parties are under the same pressure of deadlines that you are, and everybody handles that differently. There are many people that are super hyper organized, and you might be a buyer who's not one of those folks, and this stresses you out, thinking about all the things that you have to do. And this is why finding a good guide, finding a good realtor who knows the process in its entirety, or getting a copy of one of our plans and using that with whomever, you gain a sense of control over all of these steps that you're going to have to go through. Now, the steps are very clearly laid out in a contract. And a contract is a legal document. So if there is at any point in time you are confused about that, although a realtor can help fill in the blanks, we don't practice law. You need an attorney to help you understand what you're really risking and what's happening in that process. And when it's done professionally, you'll have plenty of control and plenty of protection. But remember, everybody's under stress. And everybody's trying to hit these deadlines. Now, remember, the purchasing process, like I said, might have taken months, even over a year. You might have been looking and thinking about making this move. And now everything is accordioned down and crunched down to the closing process, which is typically, most closings happen within 30 to 45 days. And that's fast. That goes by very quickly. Where on the buy side, you have to get through your home inspection. You have to get through the signing of the purchase and sales agreement. And again, this varies state to state. In Colorado, there are even more details as I'm going through business out there as well. There are different details during this closing process, but they're all delineated. They're all outlined. It's all clear. But remember, the second point here is that a real estate closing process includes the orchestration of many third parties. So let's think about that for a second. Number one, if you haven't already engaged an attorney, but now during the closing process you want one, you have to meet that person. You have to get on the same page with that person. And that person has to review the contract that maybe you already signed, and that's okay. It's a fill-in-the-blank contract in most states, and realtors have been given permission to fill in the blanks in most states. So that's the way that it works. But now the attorney gets involved. They take a look at the terms that you've agreed to, and they look at the dates and deadlines. And along with the realtor, now you have a team in place, and that's just your team. What about the other side? You've gone and put an offer in on a property that is attached to a seller and probably another agent and even an agency and their attorney. So now all of a sudden we have these parties involved. But now you go out and you have to hire a home inspector. Now that person comes into the mix, and they have schedules and deadlines by which they have to meet your closing process. See what I'm saying? It's already sounding confusing, isn't it? Well, the good news is in a contract, it's delineated very clearly and everybody gets it. And if you're dealing with people that aren't new to the process, then we tend to stay calm, but that's not always the case, especially when you have difficult clients, because it's the client, you, the buyer, the seller, that typically gets emotional because it's go time. A move is happening. Even as the professionals, we vicariously might feel stressed out because you're stressed out if we can't control it. Look at it. I tell all my fellow realtors, get yourself under control with a process. Educate all parties before they go through this entirety. That's why I spend so much time giving away free information about the process of buying and selling in their entirety. because I want you educated. If you're doing business with anybody at the Griffin Realty Group, we want you educated. We don't want there to be a whole bunch of surprises and why didn't you tell me this type of moments. So the idea is we're going to educate you so that when it gets to crunch time, you understand all of that's going to come at you. So it's, I don't know, think about it like the wild ride. All of a sudden, the top is spinning, but in the very end, it's really spinning fast. And that's when you're anxious the most because you see money at risk. You see commitments to loans if you have one. You write a big check if you're paying cash. There's a lot going on there as a buyer. You don't want to risk all that and screw it up. Worse, it might be the house of your dreams, the property of your dreams, and you don't want to lose out on it. There was a bunch of back offers. There were a bunch of backup offers maybe. So whatever the case may be, lots of stress, lots of parties. But the third point here, and the big point of this podcast is, remember, it's in your benefit to be flexible within reason as needed to get what you want. What does that mean? Well, let's go to your side of the transaction. What happens when you can't find an inspector who can meet the deadline that you and your realtor agreed to? Let's say it's a hot market. All the home inspectors are taken. Nobody can do it. The realtor doesn't have a strong enough relationship where they can have somebody jump the line for you or add an extra hour of their time or 2 hours, 3 hours, whatever it's going to take to do the home inspection, and you're stuck. Well, now your realtor has to go back and talk to the other folks and say, we just can't get a home inspector till Monday, and the deadline is Friday. Well, you have to be careful not to let that stress you out. You have to be careful not to get mad at everybody. And on the seller, you're hoping the same. And I would talk to you if you're a seller here too. You have to be flexible. You have to understand that's the reality of the world. Everybody got overzealous. Everybody thought within the normalized time frame we were used to, maybe something could happen like that. And when it doesn't, we don't freak out. Because when you get all emotional, now all of a sudden you're starting to put the whole deal in jeopardy. And I see strange things happen at this moment in time. Let's just say it's on the sell side, because this is about the buyers in this process. Let's say on the sell side, the seller says, I can't accommodate Friday. We're happy to give you an extension till Monday. I can accommodate Saturday for the home inspection. I just can't do it. I have people in town and I can't get them out on time. Well, you can't lose it. You have to be flexible in that too. You have to understand that somebody's still living in this property possibly, and their life continues on, and they didn't know that they were going to get this deal with you, and now they have to deal with it. So be flexible. Sure, that's reasonable. Let's just check with my home inspector, make sure we can do it. Let's check with the attorney and the realtors to make sure that we have all the proper extension paperwork in place to extend the time frame, because you still want the right to do the inspection. You still want the right. In some states, they call it the objection of what happens. In other words, I don't like some of the stuff I found and I want to negotiate those items. Just make sure everything gets extended properly so the proper time to deal with home inspection results are there. How long will it take the inspector to get it back? And I'm just dealing with the first part of the process. When you get to the signing of a purchase and sales agreement, for example, in Massachusetts, now we might have two attorneys with all of the stuff that they have going on in their offices. And even though a lot of this is standardized fill-in-the-blank formula, now that they're involved, they want to add their addendums. And they want to go back and forth with their red lines. Well, what happens if they can't meet the signing of the purchase and sales agreement? Well, we just have to, again, make sure we're flexible with that time frame. Then we get into all the securing of the mortgage. And look, most mortgage companies aren't even going to take this transaction seriously until there's a signed purchase and sales agreement, until after the home inspection, until there's a definite seriousness of purpose. So now we have all the stress of a deeper underwriting. What if you're self-employed and now underwriting needs to ask a whole bunch of other questions, or they come back with an approval with conditions where you have to go get more information? You're going to get more stressed out. Seller's going to get stressed out. But as long as everybody is reasonable, that's the most important word in a closing. Is what's being requested reasonable? And it's not always the case. So as a buyer, if you know that, or an agent especially, if you know that you have a little bit of a difficulty trying to stretch up to this number, you need to be honest with people. That is downright fraud to know that you can't financially do something, tie up a seller's property, hoping that maybe you can renegotiate down into your price range. I've seen that before. Unacceptable and bordering on illegal, right? So the point is, If everybody is reasonable and the request makes sense, meaning it's logical, that just there was something wrong with somebody's calendar and they couldn't meet the deadline because of that, but they're working on it and they show you proof of that, or the attorneys are talking and you have confirmation of that. The realtors have all of the extension signed properly. That's all reasonable and happens all the time in the real estate agent business. But remember, it's in your benefit to be flexible within that reasonable, logical point of time to get what you want. The property. That's why you're in this to begin with. Go back to zero-based thinking at the beginning of the transaction. Why did you pursue that property? Why did you bid for that property? Why did you negotiate? Why are you going through this property? Because you want that property. That's where you want to live. So in this lousy 30 to 45, maybe longer time period, don't get so emotional and so upset about having to be flexible. And hopefully the seller is the same, where everybody's reasonable because it's what you both wanted. It's what you both agreed to just weeks ago, days ago. So remember that, okay? So let me go back, summarize the key points. We are in the buy side of the planning, the Griffin Realty Group. These are our plans. We're sharing it with you. And we're in the final module, closing the deal out. And the question on the table is, should you be flexible during the closing process? And the points below that are, remember that during the closing process, all parties are under the pressure of deadlines. Everybody that becomes a party to this transaction is under that pressure. Second point is, a real estate closing process includes the orchestration of many third parties. It's crazy how many people get involved. So just remember, it's a big orchestra, and to keep it finely tuned is no easy task. And lastly, remember, simply put, it's in your benefit to be flexible within reason as needed to get the property that you want. All right, I'll summarize it this way. A real estate transaction is the single largest financial and emotional transaction most people will ever make in a lifetime. And the closing process only heightens the level of anxiety. The key as a buyer is to remain focused on your dates and deadlines, but also be prepared to be flexible when necessary to get the property that you wanted to start with. All right. Remember, you can take immediate action to get started in the right direction if you need to sell or buy property right now or in the near future by taking and getting our free step-by-step guides. Taking advantage of is what I wanted to say, and getting our free step-by-step guides that are waiting for you at griffincourses.com. That's GRIFFIN courses.com. Also, don't forget, of course, you could subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen, or find us on any of our social media channels so that you don't miss out on any of the insights each time we upload an episode. We'd also appreciate it if you would comment and share our content with anyone thinking about selling or buying property so that they get the help that they need to be successful in this process. Remember, I always sign off the same way on these podcasts. Nobody's coming for you. Just remember that. You're going through a big transaction and nobody's coming to help you. So take action and get to work on your own plan for buying or selling, and we'll be in the next episode to help you do just that. Thanks again.